Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes, yet again on a Tuesday because the bank holidays are not our friend here at the Monday show, but we will stick with the title. And is it next week we're back on a Monday, Aaron?
Yeah, I think we're back business as usual next week, I think.
And it feels slightly strange to say we're recording this on the back of a Newcastle United defeat. There haven't been too many of them this season. Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, great weekend. Apart from the result, as you say, it always feels unusual when they lose every game at the minute. I'm going into it thinking, I've got them today. And I generally thought they'd beat Arsenal on Sunday, but wasn't to be.
Yeah, there was a lot of confidence. I thought they would win. I thought they would win 2-1. I was speaking to fellow fans and family. Everyone was very confident that Newcastle United would win on Sunday. And I wonder if maybe Arsenal had somehow tapped into that and that kind of motivated them even more. We know that Mikel Arteta played them the clip from that Amazon documentary from last season when they threw away Champions League football. So clearly they were already motivated. They wanted a bit of revenge. And I just wonder really, I think Jorginho as well said it as well, they relished the kind of atmosphere that they were coming up to. And in the end, they handled it very well and got all 3 points. That said, Aaron, on another day, Newcastle United would have won that game quite easily, I think.
Yeah, an unusual game and an odd game on the whole, I think. Neither team playing brilliantly, neither team, playing very bad. I thought it was just an odd game. Newcastle flying out the traps as they did against Tottenham, which is very good to see after, some slow starts, certainly away from home recently. And as you say, if that Jacob Murphy shot in the first minute goes in, if that penalty had been awarded soon after and a 2-0 up, I think then, as you say, I don't think Newcastle United would have thrown that away. Sort of caught on the hop a bit with the Odegaard goal and struggled to really get back into it. But look, this Arsenal team are brilliant. It's no surprise that they've been top of the table for about 90% of the season. There's no shame to losing to them. As I say, it's just an unusual feeling that we're not really used to this season.
I think for me, there's shades of how I felt after the cup final when Newcastle played all right. They created chances. They were let down with a bit of sloppy defending. That I think if you're Eddie Howe and you look back when you're watching the tapes, you will be quite angry. I think at that first goal because there's no way Odegaard should have been allowed that amount of space to take his time and pop one into the back of the net. It's one thing going through the legs because you can't really compensate that, but the fact that we had time to pick his spot is where I think Eddie Howe will be quite disappointed with. But yeah, it just felt like they played all right, and it's kind of an opportunity missed. And I think they will be disappointed that they didn't come away with at least something because, like I say, they didn't play badly. They just didn't take the chances. And I think when you're against a top side like Arsenal, and there aren't many better sides than Newcastle this season, you've got to be clinical and you've got to take those chances.
Yeah, and I think we've been so used to Newcastle beating the top teams this season. Chelsea came up here. I know Chelsea have been off the boil this year, but Chelsea came up here in September, October, easily beaten. Manchester United played off the park last week. Tottenham absolutely obliterated. They got a draw at City. We're sort of used to them managed to grind out these results against the big teams, and I think, as you say, certainly from the fan perspective, obviously I don't know what the players were feeling before the game, but I think certainly from a fan perspective, there was maybe a little bit of overconfidence. But they played well, Newcastle. I thought, they matched them for a lot of the game. It was a very niggly, feisty game. It was, probably a horrible one to play in. They needed a bit of help from Nick Pope at times, who I thought was Newcastle's best player. And look, as I say, Arsenal, very, very good this season. There's no shame in losing to them. And yeah, they just need to make sure they bounce back against Leeds now.
I think what is refreshing that you look at this result, I think what you can apply to most times that Newcastle, if not all the times Newcastle will lose against the top side, because it will happen, is that it's not for the one to try and they will go toe-to-toe with the big sides. Whereas under previous managers, it was, well, we'll sit back, we'll absorb, and if we get a point, it's a bonus. Whereas Eddie Howe set them up to go and win at James Park, because why wouldn't you? It's a fortress. It is your home. Teams are scared to come here. And I think we saw that very early on. Murphy hitting the post. And if that goes in, I think Newcastle get all 3 points against Arsenal.
Yeah, it had shades to that sort of Tottenham start, didn't it? When Newcastle were just so quick out the traps. Tottenham were sort of shell-shocked, and I think Arsenal in the very early stages, similar to last May when they played them, when Arsenal were obviously chasing the Champions League and ultimately sort of bottled it, felt like, it was going to be one of those games again. It was a rampant atmosphere, and I think that lengthy VAR call for the penalty, and I know we're going to go on to that in more detail in a bit, but I think that maybe sucked a little bit of the energy out of it. And then with Arsenal scoring, moments later, it was a bit of a sucker punch, and I think that maybe set the tone a little bit for the later stages of the game.
Do you think the difference from last season to this season it also maybe played a part in it? Whereas last season it was all about Newcastle have stopped up, fantastic turnaround, and Howe's done a great job. This time they have something to lose. They're chasing top four. Do you think maybe a little bit of pressure creeped into the dressing room? A little bit of there is something at stake. It's not like last season where they knew Premier League football was secure. They could go out and enjoy themselves. There is something still to achieve this season.
Maybe, I mean, it might have played a factor, but again, I just think you've got to look at Newcastle's results against the top teams this season. They've got no reason to go into them games and feel any pressure. This Arsenal team was quite similar to the one that played them at St James's Park last year at the back end of the season. I don't think pressure would have got into it. I think Howe and the players know it's in their hands. I think they were just beaten by a better team on the day, despite playing reasonably well. Yes, they overlooked a little bit, at certain points of the game. But it's by no means any, cause for panic. Yes, Liverpool are starting to breathe down their necks, but I think on the whole, there was positives to take from the game.
Oh, definitely loads of positives to talk about. Stephen says the long review of the penalty was a lifeline for Arsenal. Let's talk about that then, because it was the right decision in the end. I know the referee was booed off, and I know on social media there's lots of kind of suggestions that the referee had a poor game. Thinking back, we spoke about it off air, and I'm not entirely sure the referee had a poor performance. There were one or two tackles where you can argue maybe someone should have been booked, but as a whole, I think you let the game flow. And I think the penalty call was right. That for all we complain about VAR, that is what it's there for. It's to get those decisions right. Because if that's on the other foot, and that's Fabian Schär in the middle getting done for that, and that goes and it stays a penalty, we're absolutely raging, we're fuming. So it was good in one sense to see VAR get it right. Of course, it comes at the cost of a penalty for Newcastle, but I don't think you can have any complaints. It wasn't a handball.
Yeah, certainly in real time, I thought, this might be, but I think as soon as that replay started going on 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 times, and Chris Kavanagh got sent the monitor, I thought there's absolutely no way it's going to be given. And ultimately, I agree with you. I don't think it was a penalty. Of course, if that was at the other end, we'd be absolutely fuming if it was given. In terms of Chris Kavanagh's performance, as you say, going on social media straight after the game, I received 2 or 3 texts from different people saying, the ref's performance. And I thought, well, actually, he's made the right call with the penalty after, reviewing it. He hasn't had an absolute... There's no sort of one moment in that game that sticks out in my mind where I thought he's got that really wrong. He hasn't missed a penalty. He hasn't missed a definite red card. Or I didn't really understand the booing. Yes, Arsenal were time wasting. Yes, they were making it really, really hard. It was stop-start. Could the referee have maybe controlled it a little bit better? Yes, I certainly think there should have been more yellow cards. But on the whole, I think I didn't really get the instant reaction from the referee.
And one of those texts that you got came off your mum.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she said that the ref had a poor game, but again, I just don't see it.
No cake this week.
No cake this week, unfortunately.
Disappointing. It was a lovely cake. Stephen says it isn't meant to referee the game though. Clear and obvious, it wasn't. I think there's a clip going on about Alan Shearer being a bit unhappy and stating that exact point. Was it clear and obvious? But I don't really subscribe to that argument this time around, because clear and obvious, it has to be kind of very, very close, doesn't it? Like you can't really tell the difference. But when you actually look at it, it does hit the defender's leg first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the clear and obvious error, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the rules, isn't it? If it hits off their off their leg first at close range, and yeah, I can't understand the very minority of Newcastle fans, by the way, saying that they thought it was a penalty. I just, for me, it wasn't. And as we touched on, I mean, it's that thing we always say: if that was at the other end, it it was the right call. So
just one other mention of VAR, the West Ham Man United game. I mean, while we're here, thank you, West Ham. We were thanking Bournemouth not too long ago. Thank you, West Ham, for beating Manchester United. And arguably, they should have had a penalty themselves, West Ham. And somehow it was Lindelof, wasn't it? How on earth that is not given as a penalty? What were VAR doing? What are the video assistant referees doing not to award that penalty against Lindelof?
you know what's funny? When I watched that in real time, but I was watching that game live, and as soon as that wasn't given, I thought of you, and I thought Andrew's going to be sitting there going, "Oh, I'm going to have to bring VAR up on the pod again, as we do every week." But I mean, we've said it before, and I'm sure we'll be saying it this time next year. What on earth the handball rule is in this country, I've got no idea, because if that is not a handball, when he moves his arm towards it,
then he catches it.
It was baffling,
ridiculous.
But I did think of you when it happened, so
thank you. Les says watching on TV, and she agrees with Aaron's mum. The referee was ineffectual at best. VAR, another disappointing show. But at St James Park, I'm going to have to defend it and say, unfortunately for Newcastle United, got the decision right. We've mentioned there already that the goal, the Odegaard goal, I think Eddie Howe will be absolutely raging at that, the way that goal's been scored, because you'd not leave a man of Odegaard's talent with that much room, time and space to pick a spot. I suppose the big question is, if Sean Longstaff is playing, is he out of that? Does he stop him?
Potentially, I think they would have had a much better chance of saving it. It's a very poor goal to concede, one, because of the distance of where he's on the pitch, two, because of the fact nobody really goes to close him down, and obviously then number three, it goes through Botman's legs, and Pope probably would have done a little bit better had it not. You've hit it nail on the head. I think Odegaard proved yet again on Sunday why he's so highly thought of.
Best midfielder in the Premier League.
Yeah, he generally looks a class above, and I'm sort of scratching my head a little bit when Arteta gave him the captaincy at the start of the season, given how young he is, given how he doesn't come across like a Xhaka or sort of Gabriel where he leads the team, but he's just an absolute special player to watch. And it wasn't just that goal he had other moments. He obviously almost set one up soon after. Could have probably had another one himself. Just a really, really good talent. And when you give players like that time and space, they're going to punish you.
And having Jorginho in the middle, I felt, was really, really key. He's not being all that irregular in the Arsenal side, but a very shrewd signing from Chelsea. Brings that experience to the Arsenal midfield and allows the likes of Isak and Odegaard to do what they do best. And I think when you look at the effect Jorginho has had in that midfield of late, you can kind of see what Newcastle need to do in the summer in terms of buying that defensive midfielder, which then allows the two on either side just to step it up a level and do what they do best. Because I think we have to be honest, Bruno Guimarães is not the answer when Newcastle need a defensive midfielder. Yeah,
what I will say on Bruno is I thought Arsenal targeted him pretty much from minute one. You could tell he was given no time and space on the ball. And ultimately, I don't think he's a defensive midfielder. I think, and I've written about this today, I think in the summer they need to be going out and signing a real experienced, out-and-out defensive midfielder who's just happy to sit and hold and mop up anything in front of the defence. Let Bruno go forward. Let him, play in the number 8 position where he wants to, where he flourishes. And I think, I was having a conversation with one of our editors at the Chronicle who makes this point a lot, that Newcastle really struggle when they're up against a midfield three that's two holding midfielders and a number 10, which it was on Saturday. And I think, again, having just an experienced defensive midfielder who knows when to, drop onto that 10, that could be key in the summer. And I think that's where they should be looking at. But I must admit, I know Newcastle fans probably won't like me saying this because of their antics off the ball, but I think Xhaka, Odegaard and Jorginho, the three of them were very, very good on Sunday. And as I said, they made sure Bruno didn't have any impact. And look, it's no surprise that Newcastle were sort of linked with Jorginho early in the season when he was leaving Chelsea. He's a bit slow on the ball and he doesn't really have that pace, but he's a very, very good passer. And I think they show that talent on Sunday.
And Johnny says, I disagree. He's played most of his career at DM. It will be easier for us to get a better number 8 than a defensive midfielder who is better than Guimarães. Obviously, needs someone else who can play there, though.
But Bruno's already came out and given an interview not too long ago where he said, he obviously doesn't mind where he plays, whether it's sitting at the base of the defence or bombing on forward, but he ultimately wants to play in that number 8 role. And I personally think that he is much better when he's allowed to roam free and he's allowed to go forward, and we don't have to see him sort of. I feel he's a little bit restricted in that role where he's picking up the ball from Fabian Schär with his back to goal, 30 yards inside his own half. But he's proven he can play there, and how clearly likes him there. But I think they can do better without him in that position.
Martin says Conte is available on a free from Chelsea, and that's what they need. They need someone like that. And I think actually, when you look at Arsenal, they've been ever so fortunate. These so-called top teams, and obviously Man City is a top team, but we including Chelsea in that kind of bracket, have allowed these players to go. I mean, Shevchenko, Jorginho, it's amazing that they've landed on their feet somehow and persuaded them to go. I suppose it's not that difficult. You're only moving across the road if you're from Chelsea, but also persuading the likes of Chelsea to let top class players go, which are only going to benefit Arsenal, and hopefully Newcastle can have the same look this summer. Because if you sign someone like Kante, that is immediately going to boost your midfield and your options.
Ultimately, yeah, I think Arsenal have done, as you say, a masterstroke. I think they lulled all these big teams into a really false sense of security, in the sense, we can give Arsenal some of our rejects. It's not going to matter. And obviously they still could win the title, but if not, they've gone very, very close with signing 3 players who have got experience in winning titles. Eddie Howe spoke about at the start of the season, clubs did them no favours last summer, Chelsea being one of them. And I think it's going to get even harder to sign players from the Premier League. Certainly they're close rivals this summer. I certainly don't think the likes of Manchester City and Arsenal are going to be giving Newcastle anyone, if I'm completely honest.
Derek says, Bruno has already said he loves to score and make goals. And we've seen a bit of that this season, obviously. I mean, I think yesterday was another poor performance from Bruno. And I think we've mentioned it the last couple of weeks. I think he really is struggling. Yesterday, he wanted too much time on the ball. When Eddie Howe talks about controlling emotions, he was one of those players who really let the emotions get the better of him. And we talk about needing a plan B, or worrying there's not a plan B if Isak and Wilson play together. Well, what's the plan B when Bruno has a bad game? Because he is the linchpin. He's the cornerstone. When he's on form, Newcastle are obviously a much better side. But when he has a bad day at the office, like I felt he did yesterday, I'm not putting all the responsibility on him, but I felt he was far from his best. Newcastle just don't seem to have that bit of magic. And I think there needs to be a plan B. And obviously that comes in the summer. That's the remedy. Signing someone who can fill in for Bruno when he's having an off day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Eddie Howe made it clear. And Jan, everybody knows it, that they've been light in midfield. They probably in an ideal world would have had a little bit more time to replace John Joe Shelvey. Because we've already seen when Bruno gets injured or Joelinton gets injured, they're really, really stretched. This summer's all about adding depth, not just in the midfield, but in maybe at centre-back, definitely at left-back, maybe on one of the flanks, and even another striker. Then they need to be adding more options. And this is no disrespect to the players that are on Newcastle's bench at the moment, but if they're playing Champions League football next year, they need to lift the level of that squad. Not significantly, because they've done very, very well this season, but I think they just need a little bit more in a few positions to just give them a few more options and plan Bs, as you say.
So if you're Steve Nixon and you're Eddie Howe, Aaron's just trying to pick up his phone very subtly here because he's dropped it on the floor.
Sorry,
classy as always. If you're Newcastle United's transfer team and you're looking at the midfield, which we believe is going to be their number one priority, who are you going all out? Who is at the top of that list?
I mean, this is maybe an unrealistic target. I think everyone would agree, but Declan Rice is obviously going to be the name.
120 million. You can see Newcastle splashing that amount of cash.
No, so that's why I said it's quite unrealistic. Let's talk more realistically. Maybe someone like Calvin Phillips, if you can persuade Manchester City. And I know I've just said City aren't going to be doing Newcastle any favours, but if you can get him anywhere near back to what he was like at Leeds, you've got a real player there. I think there's a lot of good options in Europe. There's of course Gigante, who plays for Sporting Lisbon, who's very highly rated. Amadou Hayora, another one. Leipzig, likely to leave for the Premier League in the summer, another one. There's a lot of options out there to improve the base of that midfield.
But do you need someone with Premier League experience? Because again, I go back to Jorginho coming in at Arsenal, and now obviously Arsenal have a host of experience in the Premier League. But I'm just thinking yesterday, when you look at Newcastle and players losing their head, so if it hasn't happened often this season, but when players have been on the verge of losing it, it's Kieran Trippier's running over and he's stopping it. But yesterday it was Kieran Trippier that really got wound up and caught up in it all. And then there was no one really, in terms of a leadership role, coming over and trying to sort it out, calm it down. I'm just wondering, do you go for someone like Hedora, who's been playing over in Europe but hasn't got that experience, who's still a very young player? Or do you target someone who has had experience in the Premier League, or at least is 27, 28 and has a bit more experience behind them and you know, a bit wiser, got a wiser head on them?
I don't think you necessarily need Premier League experience. I get your point completely, but you've only got to look at the impact Sven Botman, Alexander Isak, and Bruno have had on this team. And neither of them, none of the three had set foot in the Premier League. I get your point about experience. Maybe if they're going down that route, you look at somebody like Edson Alvarez, who plays, at the base of Ajax's midfield, very experienced, Mexican international, who's, a leader in that Ajax team over in Holland. But yeah, I don't think it's essential that they need to get someone from the Premier League.
No, we've got a few comments here saying, break the bank for Rice. He won't mind playing second fiddle to Sean, says Derek. And Les points out it's a massive if regarding getting Calvin Phillips back to match fitness. Never mind Eddie Howe fitness, which is a point. He's only started 2 games this season, both cup games. Didn't even get on against Leeds, did he? So it hasn't quite worked, but obviously clearly very talented player. Gareth Southgate, for some reason, continues to put him in his England squad. Sure, that shows you the ability that that Calvin Phillips has. Let's talk about Pope versus Ramsdale, because it was a battle of the ages, and both keepers, with Gareth Southgate in the stands watching on, it was a fantastic performance by both of them. Unfortunately for Newcastle, Pope couldn't keep a clean sheet, but he put in a man of the match performance, didn't he?
Yeah, he was Newcastle's best player for me. I thought he really did keep them in the game. 2 or 3 huge saves in that first half, when Newcastle could have been 2 or 3 down going into the break. Was he at fault for either goal? Probably not. He's probably kicking himself for that first one, but I think going through Botman's legs really does distract him. And obviously that second one, when Fabian Schär puts it in, there's not too much you can do. I thought he was really, really good, and he's still a little bit shaky with his feet. He still gives you a few, that chance where he goes to clear it and
It's
just
Saka.
misses Saka heart in the mouth at that moment. But other than that, I thought he's really, really good. His shot stopping still second to none.
Yeah, well, without him, it would have been 3 or 4.
No, absolutely, definitely. And I must say as well, Aaron Ramsdale, he does get some stick and he likes to wind opposition fans up, but he is very, very good goalkeeper. He's been fantastic this season. And England are in safe hands with a pair of them fighting it out.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the footwork of Nick Pope, because obviously a lot of criticism has come the way of David De Gea after what happened against West Ham. Now, a lot of criticism is that he can't play with his feet. He can't play out from the back. He makes the Manchester United defence a wee bit nervous. And we sit here quite often and say, well, Nick Pope's the same, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yet, there's not a question that Eddie Howe's looking for a new goalkeeper in the summer.
No.
So I'm just wondering, because obviously they want to play the same way Manchester United and Newcastle, don't they? They want to play out from the back. So what is it? Why am I United looking for a new goalkeeper, but Newcastle United aren't?
I think, look, with David De Gea, he's probably a little bit past his best in that regard. He's got a lot of errors in him, not just with his footwork, but also, as we saw on Sunday, he is letting a few sloppy ones in. Nick Pope, I think his shot stopping more than makes up for the fact that he isn't too good with his
Best
feet.
in the league at that? I would
Yeah,
argue so.
I would say certainly this season, I don't think there's been a better shot stopper out there. And look, I think, yes, Newcastle United want to play out for the back. We've seen them start to do that more, but I think unless you're unless Pep comes to Newcastle and suddenly wants Nick Pope to start playing 30 yards out of his goal and really starting attacks from the back, I don't think you've got too much to worry about the fact that he's not the best with his feet. I just think, there is sort of collective hold another breath whenever the ball gets played back to him. But fantastic on Sunday, fantastic all season. And yeah, as you say, certainly no chance he'll be replaced in the summer.
There were a few times against Arsenal where I did just feel like shouting, just kick it up the pitch, because there was enough times where they were just trying to pass it about. They're being pressed high, and it wasn't necessarily that maybe Arsenal were even in their face. For whatever reason, the defence at times just looked a little bit shell-shocked, and I think I'm a big fan of playing out from the back. It looks nice when it works, but there are times when you've just got to put your foot through it, because you're going to get caught eventually. And thankfully, Newcastle, didn't get caught. They still lost the game, but they will get caught, and it someday it will cost them dearly.
Yeah, well, we've already seen it a couple of times this season. Obviously, Pope had a little bit of a shaky spell a month or two ago, but as you say, you can sort of forgive that because of how well he is, keeping the shots out.
Yeah, right. I don't say this very often, so you're going to end up screen recording this and playing it to your heart's content.
Everybody get this clipped up.
Aaron's mom, you'll be probably recording this and playing it back as well. Aaron, you were right.
Thank you very much. I know I was.
Should I tell you why you were right?
Yeah.
So you're already assuming you know why
I already
you're right.
know, but you can tell me anyway.
Aaron has gone against the tide, hasn't he, when it comes to Wilson and Isak, and he said he doesn't subscribe to the belief they should start from the word go. Eddie Howe decided to start them from the word go against Arsenal, and there's no other way to say it. It just didn't work. It didn't work. Isak looked very unhappy, partly because of the way Arsenal set up. They dropped deep and they kind of invited him on. He didn't seem to like that. I think he likes it when the defense steps up and he can then go in and around them. Arsenal just had a game plan and it worked perfectly. But whatever's been working between them two when the changes are made in the second half of games recently, it wasn't there from the off. And I don't think we'll see it again this season.
Yeah, look, people do call me the broken clock twice a day.
How long have you been planning that one? You messed it up.
But no, I did feel vindicated. And look, I don't want to be vindicated. I would have loved to Isak and Wilson have started together on Sunday and blown Arsenal out the water. But I just think when it wasn't working, and this was my big fear with starting the two of them, is that the full point of them playing together recently has been working so well, but Newcastle have needed to change the game. Brentford, Everton, Southampton. I don't know. I just think without having that recognised striker on the bench to mix it up in the second half, I thought, yes, you bring in Maxi and Gordon on for the last 15 minutes, but I'm not sure. I just think it's much better to have that plan B. Isak, who we know can play out left, just looked a little bit isolated. He looked, I think Arsenal had his number a little bit. Wilson didn't have, a very good game compared to his usual standards. Whether we'll see it or not again this season, I'm not too sure. I think a lot of it depends on Longstaff, because I think as soon as Longstaff's back in that team, I think Joelinton again moves out to the left, which I'm perfectly fine with. Maxi is now getting back up to speed. I know I only give him 20 minutes the other day. And you've got Gordon as well. So there's options there. For me, I just like to see, that plan B available from the bench.
Those who want to see it again might argue, well, it's the first time it's happened. Do they need just to get into sync?
Yeah, that's another argument. And look, I'm not saying, I'm sitting here vindicated. I knew it wouldn't work. I was completely fine with that starting 11 on Sunday. I like Isak out left. I think he looks comfortable there. Wilson, could you really have dropped him after his 2 at Southampton? Probably not. It was probably the right call by Howe. And maybe they do just need a couple of weeks to get up to speed. But I just think do that once they qualify for the Champions League, if you really have to. I think it didn't work on Sunday. I just think get over the line first and then sort of experiment with it.
Do you run the risk also when you start them as they did against Arsenal and it's not worked, then you have to take one off and you push one up top, as I think it was Isak, wasn't it? Wilson came off.
Yeah.
He's already lacking confidence. He's already down in the dumps. It's not the same as if you're bringing them off the bench where he's got a point to prove. And I'm just wondering, when you've already had an hour of it not working, not going your way, do you think is it harder to snap back into a bit of a positive mood and make sure that you're up for whatever comes your way compared to what it's like when you do come off the bench?
Yeah, I would say so. I think we've seen it the last, month or two where one of the others came off the bench and instantly the team gets a big lift. They personally probably get a big lift. And I don't know, I just thought Sunday when they changed it, as you said, Isak moved down the middle, Wilson came off. Maxi I thought did okay when he came on, but he didn't really see that sudden surge that we've seen when one of the two strikers has came on. And I just think there's a lot of players fighting for that one spot out on the left, and I'm just not sure whether Isak's the man to start there. That's all.
Yeah, I suppose as well. It's interesting that when both of them start, there's no body on the bench, is there? No youth players coming on the bench to fill in the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they maybe had a third striker in their ranks, then it wouldn't be too bad with them doing it. But I just think when you've only got the two of them out there, and to be fair, speaking of youth talent, we haven't mentioned him yet, but I thought Elliot Anderson looked quite lively coming on. We've been banging the drum recently, certainly trying to wanting to see him more, wanting to get more minutes. And I thought he came on in shape, like had he had a little bit more time, he would have done well. But again, that's something to address in the summer. I think they need maybe one more option, whether it's the third striker or another winger. I'm not too sure, but
I think they've got to go out and get a third choice striker. And I was looking actually as well, maybe where they could target. I think they'll follow a similar strategy as they did with Hugo Ekitike, where they'll go for someone who's young, can learn off the likes of Isak and Wilson. And you look at the French league, and I was going to actually mention the chap who plays up top for Montpellier, and I've totally forgotten his name. No,
sure.
He scored 4 over the weekend. It was like he knew I was going to mention him. But when you look at the top scorers in Ligue 1, there are a lot of young players there who are 19, 20, 21, 23 who will come in, and I don't think we'll expect to be first choice in a team hopefully battling in the Champions League, and can learn and can progress. And you got Graham Cual as well, who might come back into the fold after disastrous spell at Hearts. Wasn't even on the bench in the game over the weekend. But I think that's the strategy they'll go for, and it's just who it is. I mean, any names that spring to mind for you?
No, not off the top of my head, but what you said about Ligue 1 in France is absolutely right. Southampton were a team that took advantage of that, signing Sekou Mura, who had a very good season last year in France's top division. There's definitely talent out there to be to be sought after, especially even you've got to look at clubs like Rennes, who have got former Arsenal striker Balogun out there, who's done very well. So there's certainly options, and I agree. I think if they're going to go out and get a third choice striker, I think it should be someone young who can develop, learn from Isak, learn from Wilson, and over time maybe become a future number 9 for the club. Graham Cual is a great example. I know he's not maybe an out-and-out striker, but he's certainly a player who can play across the front three. A shame about the Hearts loan. I think they'll learn from that. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go out on loan again next season. But yeah, I think they maybe need one more in that position.
Eli Wahi is the person I was talking about. 20 years of age. Had an absolute storm out of a season. 17 goals in 30 games this season. Got 10 this season before. So I think they'll be looking at those kind of players. Like I don't claim to know anything about him really, let alone how to pronounce his name. But it's those kind of players I think that we'll be targeting. Someone who's not going to have a huge outlay, kind of low risk factor, I think is the best way to describe it. Someone who's going to cost 20, 30 million to this Newcastle ownership. That's not a huge amount of money, but there's potential there.
And that's what we saw last summer when they were so adamant that they were going to try and get Hugo Ekitike. Obviously, we all know how that's gone at PSG. It does look like Newcastle have dodged a bullet, given that he spent all season complaining that he hasn't been starting above Neymar and Mbappe and Messi.
What were you expecting?
Exactly. Imagine if he came to Newcastle. Well, I'm not even starting over Callum Wilson. What's the point? But I certainly think someone in that age bracket from that division, from a team like, as people are saying in the comments here, Montpellier, Rennes, teams like that, I think that's where you need to be targeting.
We know that there are like kind of 3 lists that Newcastle are potentially working from for the outcome of this season. But do you think with someone like that, we know they need a third striker? We believe the strategy is going to be similar as we see it to the Ekitike chase. Is that something you expect once the window opens, they'll pretty much have done and dusted? Because is it other kind of positions, i.e. that defensive midfield, where you do have to kind of wait and see what football you're playing next season? Because you're not going out and just signing a £20 million youngster. You're going to want a Declan Rice. You're going to want a Calvin Phillips, who are going to want Champions League football. So you do have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think there's certainly certainly an element of that. These young players, it doesn't really matter whether you're in the Champions League or the Europa League or the Conference League, because you know that they're probably not going to, as you say, walk into that first team. Eddie Howe keeps, reiterating whenever we ask him anything about transfer, he says, well, we don't know what competition we're playing in next season, so we'll make a decision on that when we know more. They'll certainly have lists drawn up. They'll have plan A's, plan B's. I'm sure conversations are already well underway as to who they're going to be bringing in. But I think, as you say, Champions League football next season will be a game changer in terms of signing, real top-class outlets.
So while we're here, shall we have a little listen to Eddie Howe speaking after the game against Arsenal? This is what the Newcastle United manager had to say.
Eddie, you must be slightly frustrated the way that's turned out in the end, because it's a game settled by a very, very fine margin.
Yeah, very much so. We felt lots of the performance was good today without probably being our best of the season. Loads of chances. Just one of those days it wouldn't go in for us. I felt if we had have scored at any stage during that game, even at 2-0 down, we were always very close to getting back into the game. So it was a game that slipped by for us, but felt the players gave everything.
They were very, very good at frustrating you as well, weren't they? They sort of did that side of the game brilliantly.
Yeah, they managed the game well from their perspective. They slowed it down. Lots of breaks in play, frustrating for us. Naturally, we wanted the ball in play more, especially when you're chasing the game. But we have to look at what we can control. We can't control that. That's the referee's job. What we can control is our ability to take our chances and possibly defend better than we did today.
Just one more on that. And Xhaka went down, I think, 4 or 5 times for treatment. Not once did Arsenal look like they had a substitute warming up. Is that one of the oldest tricks in the book? Is that a display of somebody deliberately going down for treatment to break up the game?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one for me to answer. It was frustrating from our perspective because, as I said, we wanted the ball in play. We wanted to find our rhythm. It was very stop-start. That was, of course, suiting the away team. As the home team, you want the ball in play. So frustrating in that sense for us, definitely.
Eddie, you've been very measured when you've been winning games. Do you have to be equally measured now that you've lost one and what's to come?
Yeah, I think at this stage of the season, with 4 games to go for us, I think absolutely I have to be measured. I have to be, I think, very positive. I don't think there's any time for negativity to creep into my psychology or the players' psychology. I'm proud of the players today. I know that the result went against us, but you could see the effort and commitment of the group, what we tried to deliver. It was a high quality game. It was end to end, it was open. But we were just missing that X factor today, that missing part of our game. And we hope against Leeds in our next game that we bring it all back together.
We'll talk about time wasting in a moment, but I think what I take from that last bit there, saying, we're just missing that kind of X factor. He's proud of the players, but we're just missing that X factor. And it's refreshing because I think under previous managers, Newcastle had performed like that and lost 2-0. It would have been cause for kind of celebration. We played well, we just didn't win. And that would have been the end of it. But I think what we get with Eddie Howe is he'll praise the players to a certain degree, but also he will then go back over what went wrong and make sure that next week the same thing does not happen, whether that's taking your chances, whether that's getting out to the best player that you left unmarked. He is going to make sure that whatever didn't go Newcastle's way, whatever they can control, the next game they will control and be better at it. He's not resting on the effort and commitment of the players, which is never in doubt.
We often ask Eddie Howe after a game, especially big wins, like the Tottenham game, what are you going to do to celebrate, Eddie? How are you going to enjoy this tonight? He goes, well, I'll go home and I'll stick the kettle on and get some biscuits and I'll review the game. And if that's what he's doing when they're beating teams like Tottenham 6-1, you can, be sure that he's doing that when they lose at home to Tottenham 2 weeks later. I think they'll have, as you say, all those problems that we saw on Sunday and, not getting out Ødegaard early enough, not, maybe putting enough pressure on their midfield. They'll all be worked on and Eddie Howe isn't lying when he says he wants to win every game. We've seen that with the way he sets his teams up against, whether it's Manchester City, whether it's Southampton, he wants to go out and win. So that'll fuel the fire for Saturday, I think.
When he mentions missing the X factor, what is the X factor that was missing?
I'm not too sure because it feels like you can't go too hard on this team because of what they've done this season. You can't say, oh well, they're missing a huge Declan Rice type in the middle, because they're not. They're playing really well. They're matching team. I can't pick anything off the top of my head, but I think right, they're missing this spark, or that starting 11 that starts is matching teams, and so I don't
is
know.
it just maybe Eddie Howe has set the bar right here, and it's so high, and they've just come under it? Is that maybe what he like? Because when you have such high expectations and you put them on your team, and maybe when you do lose like this, even though you've played well, that you're always going to feel like you're missing something because the standard is set so high.
Maybe, but I just think the goalposts have been moved so much this season. I mean, think back to where they were this time last year. So many games you would have just thought, right, well, we'll just write this off and chalk up the defeat. Even this season, when they went to the Etihad, you're thinking the run of form they're on, they could get something here. It's not out of the realms of possibility. So I think that needs to be, and this is not me saying Eddie Howe, you need to remember this, but sometimes I think as a collective, the players, Eddie Howe, the fans, it's just useful to take a step back and think they have came so far in such a short space of time. It's no surprise that they're missing the X factor, because really a lot of these players were in a relegation fight last year, whereas Arsenal have had years to build squads that are oozing with players with that X factor. So yeah, I'm not too sure on that one.
I hope Newcastle aren't in a relegation fight next year. Be a fall from grace, that, wouldn't it? Let's go on a time wasting now. And Eddie Howe said, it's not up to him. They can't control that. That's up to the referee to manage that. And obviously, a lot's been said about Arsenal's antics on the pitch and players going down. Ramsdale falling over thin airs. Almiron chased the ball down and what have you. And it is so frustrating to see, because obviously you want the balls, Eddie Howe said, there to be in play, especially when you're chasing the game down. But I've got to be honest, I don't think Newcastle can have any complaints at all, because Newcastle throughout this season have been very clever in the way they've managed games. Whether it's been Jacob Murphy tripping over the ball before he takes a throw in, or whether it is Fabian Schär going down. They know what they're doing, and we've praised them for it, because that's what the top teams do. They know how to protect a lead, and it's, as the opposition, you're going to be so angry, you're going to be frustrated. But as Dan Burn actually said afterwards, and I've got the quotes here, I don't think Newcastle can have any complaints. And Dan Burn said, of course it's frustrating, but that's what they said we did at their place. We get a lot of stick for slowing the game down, which I don't know if we intentionally do all the time. They did that, but it's part and parcel of football. We can't do it and then complain when it happens to us. And he's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, let's not make any bones about it. Arsenal, some of their players were an absolute disgrace with it on Sunday. Ramsdale, for one. Xhaka, who, is just, he's a horrible player to play against. But I think Burn hit the nail on the head. I think, you can't all have it. You can't have your cake and then eat it. I think we've seen so many times this season, as you've just mentioned a few there, Lascelles stopping the throw in at Chelsea, and Newcastle have done it. And it is a compliment, the fact that Arsenal feel they need to do it. It is a massive compliment that Arsenal think, you know what, if we need to eke out as much time because Newcastle can punish us. And look, when Newcastle do it, it's brilliant, and we've got to come to accept that teams are going to do it against them as well, as they start to disrupt the top six.
Newcastle did allow Arsenal to wind them up something rotten. Didn't I mean, we mentioned earlier in the show about Trippier. It's the first time we've really seen Kieran Trippier lose his rag, and I mean, he was
him and Jesus had it for a long time, and Wilson and Xhaka were at it for a long time. Throughout the game, they really, really good at each other. And I thought that was one moment that Kavanagh did sort of lose the game before half time. There was a 5-minute period where it was, all hell was sort of breaking loose. But yeah, I think that was the first time we've really seen Newcastle rattled in a long time.
I think there's not much to be disappointed about Sunday. The result didn't go the way, and as Eddie Howe said there, loads of positives to take. But I think that would be one thing he will be disappointed at, and just wanting to tighten up slightly, is just not allowing the opposition to get inside your head, because it worked to Arsenal's benefit. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think over time, Newcastle will become more accustomed to it. I think the fans will also become a little bit more accustomed to it. I think it just all feels very new. You know, teams like Arsenal never used to come to St James Park and time waste anywhere near that. And I think it maybe just a little bit of shock the system sometimes. But look, Newcastle have learned to give it. They need to take it as well.
And Graham says, every student needs lessons, valuable stuff on Sunday. Superb game of football. We have a team that tries.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on there, Graham. Johnny says, we can't have any complaints. Part of football. Just funny seeing Arteta and other pundits, fans of Arsenal, who were so enraged with it, the Emirates, now saying it's fine.
One thing I will say, and that's a really good point by Johnny, is that I saw a Newcastle fan made a very, very good clip of Martin Keown back on TalkSport in January saying when Arsenal drew 0-0 and there was all this furore about Newcastle time waste. Oh, Joelinton, he was an absolute disgrace last night. I've never seen a player time waste like that. He should be, he should be a retrospective ban for it. And he clipped up what Keown said on Sunday night about Xhaka, and Keown, obviously a massive Arsenal fan. Granit Xhaka, an absolute masterclass in time waste and games management. Oh, he was brilliant. And I just thought, what chance have Newcastle got if that's someone in the media on a big platform? But it's right, it is just sort of a little bit hypocritical at times.
But you know what? If and I think it's a big if Eddie Howe sees that and does allow himself to get, wound up by the comments of the national media, which I'm very doubtful he will do. But if he did, then he uses it to Newcastle's benefit. Exactly. It's that, Newcastle United against the world mantra, which has served them very well so far. I do want to just mention something which I thought was quite amusing, though. Fabian Schär, the man of steel who shows no emotion. He can let himself get a bit wound up sometimes, but as a whole, you very rarely see him apologising to anyone. But when he chopped down his fellow countryman in the middle of the park, he was in play. He was very quickly to apologise. He had that little look and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," which I felt was quite amusing.
Yeah, he looked like he slipped, but it was a late tackle, wasn't it, on Xhaka? And I think, he was.
It looked like when you played football, 5-a-side with your dad's mates, and you accidentally trip your dad up, and you were very quickly to apologise.
I'll have to take your word for it. I've never done that. So.
Sorry, Dad. Let's look into the comments then. We've got a few people talking about James Maddison. We know that he's been strongly linked to Newcastle. And we've got a few people talking about Declan Rice as well. Darren says, seeing the comments above, no thanks to Rice. Every time I've seen him play, he's not worth £100 million plus. He thinks it's madness. He also references James Maddison, says, could he join the summer? Is he waiting to see if we grab Champions League football first? Before I ask you that question, I did want to speak about Maddison because obviously Leicester, torrid result for them. I mean, they look like they're probably heading down. It's so tight at the bottom. So nice that Newcastle aren't involved. But, some of the critics of James Maddison point to his attitude and is he the right man to bring into the dressing room because maybe he's a little bit selfish, maybe he's a bit egotistical. But his comments after the game yesterday I thought were really refreshing. It was a really honest interview on the BBC about how Leicester lost to Fulham and saying that, they're creating chances, but they're not defending. And the journalist that he was speaking to obviously heard that, went on that line. So, you're creating chances. The defense have got to stand up and make sure they're tight at the back. And James Maddison said, no. Us as a team defensively. And I just thought, do you know what? If there are any questions over his attitude, over his character, that little clip actually shows that maybe the concerns aren't really valid because he could have quite easily thrown his teammates under the bus there. Look, I'm scoring goals. I'm creating chances. What are you doing in the back? You're always messing up. But no, as a team defensively, we're letting everyone down. And for me, I thought that was another kind of tick in the box to why maybe Newcastle should go after Maddison, because clearly on that interview alone, he's a team player, even when the cards are not in their favour.
Yeah, somebody asked me about James Maddison the other day and what my thoughts were about, Newcastle potentially signing him. And they sort of said, oh, well, his attitude's not very good, is it? And I think they always harp back to that time where he got called up for England and he was spotted on the casino, said he was ill, whatever. But it's something that we mentioned before. He was heavily linked with Newcastle last summer, probably wanted the move. Leicester priced Newcastle out of it. And there was no sulking. There was no poor run of form. Actually, he started the season in blistering form when Newcastle was still being linked with him. So, and yeah, those comments obviously after their defeat yesterday goes again to prove that I think he does probably have that attitude Eddie Howe's looking for. we've spoken a lot about on this pod. Fans, are sort of a little bit split as to whether he fits in the system. Some saying it's an absolute no-brainer. There has been a lot of talk of him obviously preferring to move to London, but if Newcastle United are playing Champions League football and Tottenham are playing Conference League football, then I might change his mind somewhat.
Johnny says Madison doesn't fit our system. There's no way Eddie moves to play number 10. I was all up for Madison, but realised it's just not going to happen. And if I'm not mistaken, was it last week? Kieran Trippier was asked about James Ward-Prowse, who's another man linked, and he joked that he'd be taking off set pieces.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, he says something like that. It's always going to get picked up and ran with. But I mean, it's interesting because we're talking about Newcastle signing a central midfield. Now, Madison's not going to play there. Now, when you look at how well Almiron, how well Murphy have played, St. Maximin before he picked up the injury was looking a little bit back on his form. Isak obviously can play out there. You suspect that if Madison doesn't play as a number 10, he will have to play out wide. Where does he fit?
I think he's already pretty much came out and said in the past, he certainly told Brendan Rodgers that he didn't want to play down the right or down the left. I think he will want assurances about where he's going to play. Does he fit in the system? Maybe not, because he likes to play as a 10. Newcastle don't really do that. I'm sure he's versatile enough to move into one of those 8 positions that we see Willock and Longstaff occupy week in, week out. I'm sure he'd have no problem with that. But, if Tottenham say, right, well, we'll give you a number 10 position and a lot more money, then, who knows? It's going to be very interesting to see where he goes in the summer, because I think even if Leicester managed to stay up this season, I think he's a goner.
And Harvey Barnes as well.
Yeah, very good player. Another one that splits opinion. I mean, he has done on this pod before in the comments. Depending on which Newcastle fan they speak to, they either love him or hate him. Me personally, I think he's a fantastic player. Really, really positive. Eye for goal. Very good at assisting. Good at dribbling. Would tick a lot of boxes for me.
Yeah, one to watch. Now, we got a lot of nice comments last week about the trivia that I gave Aaron. Obviously, the Andy Carroll remark went down swimmingly.
Yeah, I got a lot of text messages about that.
I'm not going to apologise. You deserved to go viral for that. So every week, I've decided I'm going to give Aaron a bit of a quiz. He doesn't know what the subject is, and we're going to test him and see how it goes. You guys watching live, I hope you can play along. So, Newcastle United have got 4 games left this season.
Yeah.
Leeds, Brighton, Leicester, and Chelsea. Can you name the last player to have played for Newcastle, then moved to Leeds for each of those clubs? We'll start with Leeds as they're next on the calendar. I've got the dates written down if you want a bit of help.
Yeah, I need the date for the Leeds one.
So joined summer 2017, joined Leeds in summer 2017, and left in the summer of 2019, mutual consent. Now, I betted to myself that you'd get 2 out of the 4.
And was this one of them?
This isn't the one that stands out.
No, I'm struggling to think of someone who joined Leeds in 2017. I think I'm going to need to pass on that one.
You're going to need to pass.
Yeah.
Vernon Anita.
Nah, I don't think I would have got that one. I don't think I would have.
Clearly, because you haven't got it. Then on to Brighton.
That one will be.
Johnny just said Andy Carroll there. That's going to follow you around with it.
No. I'm going to need the years again for this
2011. Played 5 times.
For Brighton. 2011.
This is the one I thought you'd get.
Well known.
The person is. Whether his move to Brighton is well known is another question.
Give us his position.
Goalkeeper. Don't say Tim Krul.
I wasn't going to. Brighton goalkeeper.
Steve Harper.
No, I couldn't have told you that.
Steve Harper. I thought you would have got that one.
I didn't get that one.
Two down. 2 to go.
Yeah.
Leicester. I mean, this is a given. You've got to get this one. I don't even want to give you the year. The last Newcastle United player who moved from Newcastle to Leicester.
Give us the year.
2019. He's played 80 times and scored 12 goals.
Oh, yeah, Jose Perez.
Jose Perez, that is the one currently on loan at Real Betis. I tell you what, in terms of needing a strike as a stopgap, I said it off camera. Actually, I didn't say it on, but as we're here, I'll say it now and get slated for it. A cheeky little loan deal for him in January, you know,
No.
just to fill
He's
the gap.
past it. He's past it.
I'm not saying he would have played, but you know, an option off the bench, scored against Manchester United, definitely getting slated for that. Finally, then Chelsea.
Oh, Newcastle, Chelsea. There's probably going to be a few here. What year?
Close the book now. 2 seconds. I think he played 2017, was it?
17.
Do you know, I haven't written the year down, but yeah, I think it was 2017.
Remy?
Like Remy. Yeah, we had some good guesses there. A lot of people got Perez. A lot of people got Anita, actually. Derek said Demba Ba, which I think is everyone's go-to when it comes to
I
that.
was
But
torn between the two, but Remy was later, wasn't he? Yeah.
Demba Ba only played a season for Chelsea, actually, which surprised me. But yeah, it was like Remy, who had a couple of seasons at Chelsea. Now, John says Kennedy, but I mean, technically speaking, you would be right, John, but he was only on loan from Chelsea, so I disregarded that. I should have stated that at the start of the quiz. So what was that? You got 2 out of 4?
That's what you
I said,
predicted, yeah.
I said not the 2 I thought you would have got, but yeah. There we have. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. Hit that subscribe button on your podcast provider and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. It's been a pleasure, as always, and we'll catch you later in the week.